Chapter 3. An Epic Chase. Leaving the club, Isaac found solace in the peaceful atmosphere. As he crossed the highway and passed a cattle farm, he stepped onto a faint, less traveled trail leading southward through a vast barren plain. It was a clear autumn morning with a few clouds drifting lazily in the sky, foreshadowing another hot and dry day. Isaac intended to establish additional escape routes before venturing eastward. Determined to outwit any potential predators, Isaac donned a baseball cap equipped with a neck shade, preparing himself for the grueling run ahead. As he dashed forward, his sharp eyes scanned the landscape, searching for any features he could utilize to deceive future threats. For approximately 30 minutes, Isaac maintained an astonishing speed, silently and resolutely treading along the faint trail. The scorching sun and relentless heat took his toll, causing him considerable discomfort. Slowing down to preserve his energy, he suddenly felt a presence trailing behind him. Without stopping, he flung a look back along the way he had come. He saw a person, presumably a man, about a quarter of a mile away, running toward him at the same pace. Encountering another runner on the trail at this time was uncommon but not entirely unheard of. Isaac initially disregarded the stranger but remained vigilant, his senses on high alert. Accelerating once more, he continued along the trail. 10 minutes later, he glanced over his shoulder and discovered that the stranger still maintained the same quarter-mile distance. Decelerating significantly, Isaac observed as the stranger also slowed down, ensuring the separation between them remained constant. It was a cat-and-mouse game. Isaac decided to put the stranger to the test. He halted momentarily, retrieving a water bottle from his bag to quench his thirst. Surprisingly, the stranger also stopped, mimicking Isaac's actions. It became evident to Isaac that this person was not merely a fellow runner but a spy agent sent by Strong Nation. He was astonished by the audacity of their pursuit, coming again so soon. Again? He felt nausea. Pulling out his binoculars, Isaac swept his gaze across the vast expanse of the plain. There, he spotted a man dressed similarly to him, a t-shirt, long pants, and a baseball cap, but notably lacking the protective shades. No other figures appeared in his line of sight. It dawned on Isaac that this stranger's purpose was to pin him while other agents would come through vehicles when he got to a location, where it was appropriate for them to terminate him discreetly, making the murder look like a mere accident. Isaac chuckled. You haven't learned your lesson. Aware that he had enough food to run for a couple of days and enough water to run for hours before refilling, Isaac devised a plan. Instead of proceeding eastward as originally intended, he decided to continue running south without taking a break. Under the scorching heat, he anticipated his pursuer would succumb within a couple of hours. A cold, triumphant laugh escaped his lips. With each passing moment, the temperature rose alongside the relentless sun. There was no shelter from its brazen rays, and the land seemed desolate and barren, stretching into vast, empty territories. A surreal sensation permeated the air, as if plants and objects existed in a distorted reality. Distant pinnacles appeared mysterious, their shapes altered by the hot air rising from the ground and creating mirages. Isaac ensured he consumed enough water to stave off dehydration, knowing could lead to hallucinations. After another 30 minutes of running, Isaac cast a glance backward. To his dismay, his pursuer still trailed behind, maintaining a quarter-mile distance. The sight of the man reminded Isaac of the atrocities committed by Strong Nation, particularly their leader Pighead, who suppressed the people and cold-bloodedly perpetrated genocide against minorities in the western region. The incarceration of over 1 million innocent individuals in concentration camps ignited a burning anger within any conscious person. Rage surged through Isaac's veins. Go to hell. Anger suddenly flared in his heart like a fiery pang, which affected him like something coming from the unknown. He trembled. Come on, bastard, he yelled as he sped up, running like a sprinter. Speed running had become Isaac's way of dissipating anger, a method he found effective in regaining control. As Isaac continued his intense run, his anger matured into a profound introspection. He pondered why he was so angry and ran so swiftly and sternly. What power had made him undertake such tremendous effort and risk to carry on his mission? What force had compelled him to embark on such a perilous mission, risking everything in the process? What had kindled his rage, driving him to engage in this seemingly insane pursuit? Since the untimely death of his parents, Isaac had been exposed to the darkest aspects of humanity, and a simmering anger had taken root within his mind. He endeavored to forgive and move forward, yet each time he learned of the continued act suppression carried out by those in power, his anger was reignited, growing even deeper. Amidst the turmoil, he often felt a sense of sadness and helplessness. Who else would step up to stop the atrocities if he did not? If nobody cared, the world would descend into a dystopian nightmare, a wretched existence of suffering and despair. Putting an end to their malevolent deeds had become his primary objective, his ultimate mission. However, buried within the depths of his heart, a flicker of compassion persisted. Despite his doubts regarding their worthiness of salvation, a part of him yearned to rescue even those who seemed irredeemable. Despite facing immense danger, Isaac maintained a steadfast commitment to preserve life. He held on to the belief that even in the face of adversity, no one should be deprived of their existence. Recalling his past actions, Isaac vividly remembered the occasions when he had saved Jade's physical body 3 times and Faye's once. The weight of their transgressions weighed heavily on his mind, stirring a sense of melancholy. In his heart, he yearned for them to find redemption, to salvage their souls from the darkness they had succumbed to. Now, once again, Isaac presented his relentless pursuer with a choice, a decisive moment between life and death. Should the predator persist in chasing him, he would succumb to exhaustion and perish in the desolate expanse. Yet, if the predator halted his pursuit and retraced his steps back to the safety of the town, he would be granted the chance to continue living. Lost in deep contemplation, Isaac felt the fatigue seep into his bones, compelling him to slow down. With confidence, he held the belief that his pursuer would be left far behind, becoming nothing more than a distant memory. The stranger might have succumbed to the unforgiving wilderness, meeting a lonely demise, an echo of the karmic consequences of his wicked actions. However, life or death ultimately rested upon his own choice. If he relinquished the pursuit and returned to the town, he could undoubtedly find a path to survival. The realization dawned upon Isaac that it was not merely a choice but his solemn duty to persist in his mission, regardless of the arduous challenges that lay before him. He existed on the precipice, teetering between life and death, understanding that failure might be his ultimate fate. If you swam in the stream of life and struggled against the wave, you were destined to suffer. You had made your choice. All sufferings came about of their own accord and were fated. Even the divine beings, whose tales his parents had recounted, did not reside in eternal serenity. They too endured the cycles of fear, struggle, and risk in their pursuit of paradise. With this understanding, Isaac pressed on, traversing the desolate lands in solitude, his mind growing increasingly serene and tranquil. When he emerged from his meditative state, the scorching heat and inhospitable surroundings once again engulfed his consciousness. Nearly an hour had slipped away unnoticed. Instinctively, he turned his head to assess the situation, only to be gripped by a chilling sensation that sent shivers down his spine. His predator, whom he had presumed would have succumbed or abandoned the pursuit, remained resolute, trailing him at almost exactly a quarter-mile distance, matching his pace. Confusion and disturbance seized Isaac's mind, for he had never encountered such a peculiar sensation before. How could a spy agent not only survive but also keep pace under these punishing conditions? Even their group leader, Donald, could not come close to doing that. Isaac resolved to put his predator to the test. Instead of continuing his straight southward trajectory, he deliberately veered off course, tracing large S-shaped paths through the desolate expanse. He aimed to immerse himself in the forsaken land, devoid of any human presence or the reach of Wi-Fi signals. As the sun soared higher in the sky, intensifying the heat, Isaac adapted his pace, alternating between different speeds during various phases of his run. Yet, regardless of his efforts, whether he sprinted or slowed his pace, the stranger remained steadfast, maintaining a constant distance of about a quarter of a mile between them. Annoyance and frustration welled up within Isaac. After an extended period of running, he abruptly changed direction, charging toward his pursuer. To his astonishment, The stranger mirrored his movements, fleeing at the same pace, as if the roles had suddenly reversed, Isaac becoming the predator and the stranger the prey. Adding to the terror, no matter how swiftly Isaac propelled himself forward, the gap between them refused to diminish. "You are testing me," Isaac muttered, a mix of confusion and puzzlement clouding his thoughts. Baffled by this perplexing turn of events, Isaac reluctantly abandoned his pursuit and reverted to his original southward course. As expected, the stranger dutifully followed suit. The realization gradually settled in that escaping from his predator within a day or two was an unattainable feat, and the adversary he faced was unlike any he had encountered before. A shiver ran down Isaac's spine, unsettling his composure. He had believed he was thoroughly prepared, but evidently, he had underestimated the might of strong nation and the resourcefulness of Donald. When he finally escaped the desolate land and arrived at a small town, the sun had already passed its zenith. On one side of the road, there stood a cluster of modest shelters, each offering an array of fresh local farm products, predominantly fruits like grapes and berries, but also melons, beans, nuts, and leafy greens. Isaac replenished his water bottles and purchased an ample supply of raw food that was fit for consumption. Continuing his journey through the town, he proceeded to run along the shoulder of a narrow highway, which led southward and intersected with various smaller roads. The highway was flanked by stretches of farmland. However, Isaac remained vigilant, not daring to run solely on the highway. Whenever possible, he veered into the farmland and followed narrow trails, wary of the relentless pursuer potentially employing accomplices driving along the highway. By making his running route unpredictable, he made it arduous for them to ensnare him without arousing suspicion among ordinary passers-by. He forged ahead with caution, acutely aware of the imminent danger. Together, they traversed a miniature desert and a largely forsaken farmland, far away from any bustling highway. The sun began to set behind the mountains, which appeared against the sky, showing their distinct rugged features. They cast long shadows on the plain. Little by little the shadows grew longer and seemed to chase after and swallow them. At last, the sun dropped below the mountains, and gloom gradually covered the summit as it had covered the plain. The environment grew cooler. As Isaac pressed on, his attention was abruptly drawn to a distant glow, accompanied by wisps of white smoke curling into the air. Intrigued, he hastened his pace towards the luminosity, all the while being serenaded by a growing cacophony that transformed into resounding cheers as he arrived at a small town illuminated by the powerful lights mounted on trucks. It dawned on Isaac that, by sheer coincidence, the town was hosting a county fair. The main road teemed with a bustling crowd, adorned in vibrant attire, and carts brimming with delectable delights, giant turkey legs, Greek gyros, chili fries, deep-fried beef, and skewered seafood. Women and young girls gracefully balanced plates of food as they strolled, while the clean-shaven young men clutched glasses of beer in one hand and skewers of fried meat in the other. On the northern side of the road, a sizable audience gathered to witness animal races featuring pigs and cows. On the southern side, thrilling county fair rides, including a Ferris wheel, carousel, roller coaster, and bumper cars, delighted visitors. Joyful cheers reverberated through the sky, permeating the atmosphere. Isaac sensed that an opportunity had presented itself. Swiftly, he made his way into a clothing store and quickly altered his attire to blend in with the local county fair fashion, acquiring the necessary garments from the shop. Concealing his backpack within a tree trunk by the store's side, he retrieved his binoculars. Merging with the bustling crowd, he indulged in a ride on the Ferris wheel. As he reached its zenith, he discreetly retrieved his binoculars, scanning the landscape. He observed his pursuer arriving in the town, visibly disoriented amidst the thronging masses, having lost track of his quarry. Filled with confidence, Isaac believed his pursuer would be unable to locate him in this vast and chaotic setting. Both he and the pursuer wandered about, eventually losing sight of each other amidst the swelling crowd, the roars of revelry growing louder as more people emerged after their evening meals. Isaac knew that the fair would persist until late into the night, as the crowd would gradually disperse. Assuming his pursuer had departed, he retrieved his backpack and quietly slipped away from the town, consciously avoiding the main road. Instead, he opted for a narrow side street that led him through an orchard of fruit trees. Concealed by the foliage, he stealthily traversed the farmland until he discovered a hidden trail. Gradually distancing himself from the town, the mountains faded into the obscurity of the night, while a faint glimmer emanated from the new moon, casting a delicate glow upon the misty sky. Resuming his arduous run, Isaac pressed forward as he determined to put as much distance between himself and his pursuer as possible. As twilight descended, the haunting cry of a hound pierced the air. Roughly half an hour later, Isaac arrived at a desolate moor, the trail growing faint. The melancholic cries of various creatures echoed in the distance, as stars emerged and cast a gentle shimmer high above. Isaac affixed a flashlight to his head, illuminating his path as he continued his run, now in a more relaxed state of mind. Lost in contemplation, he pondered the safest route to make his way back home. Suddenly, a disquieting sensation enveloped him, accompanied by a chilling gust of wind that sent shivers down his spine. Glancing back, he discovered someone with a flashlight mounted on his head, roughly a quarter of a mile behind, steadily advancing towards him. A wave of apprehension coursed through his body. His pursuer had not relented, and the relentless chase persisted. Frustration welled within Isaac as he realized he had no option but to keep running. Their headlights remained the sole sources of illumination within the vast moor, unwaveringly traversing the landscape. Isaac forced his way through thick bushes, inadvertently colliding with boulders, and ascended and descended small hills in his path. As the mist dissipated, the twinkling stars overhead imbued the air with freshness, lending an aura of tranquility and order to the surroundings. If it weren't for the pursuit that shadowed his every move, it would have been a serene and enjoyable run for Isaac. The night embodied both peace and exasperation, evoking profound emotions within him. Isaac found it perplexing that his pursuer's cohorts had yet to make an appearance. Perhaps his cunning choice of running routes had successfully thwarted their plans to ensnare him. However, despite his strategic maneuvers, he remained unable to shake off the relentless pursuit, as his adversary evidently lacked the courage to face him alone. When will this insane chase come to an end? Weariness seeped into Isaac's thoughts. Inevitably, both Isaac and his pursuer would reach their limits, and agents would close in unless he managed to outpace his relentless follower, who seemed determined to keep him within sight. Isaac had always been confident in his ability to outrun any spies from Strong Nation, but this pursuer had shattered his self-assurance. The situation was distressing and frustrating. At this juncture, he had no other choice but to run on. Varshi interjected. It had transformed into a life-or-death pursuit, testing Isaac's physical and mental endurance. If his pursuer didn't collapse first, Isaac would be in grave peril. Diego affirmed, absolutely. If he failed to win this race, death would be the penalty he'd pay. Varshi remarked, then Isaac will emerge victorious. There's a saying that when a lion chases a rabbit, the rabbit outruns the lion. The lion runs for a meal, but the rabbit runs for its life. Diego nodded in agreement. The pursuit forced him to alter his plans. He decided to head directly to Mexico before returning to the Grand Canyon. Running relentlessly southward, the chase persisted. They ran through the night until dawn, from dawn until dusk, and from dusk until noon. The relentless pursuit seemed interminable, transforming into an epic chase of historic proportions. They traversed barren lands, as well as moors, hills, valleys, and even crossed rivers. Once, while Isaac was sprinting across a moor, he was pursued by a hound, but he managed to evade its bite. His pursuer experienced a similar fate. Occasionally they passed through small towns to acquire raw food and water. On and on they ran. In the third evening, Isaac reached the border. He halted before a shallow river, carefully re-evaluating his plan. A wrong decision could exact a dreadful price. Once he crossed the river, he would lose the protection of America and become vulnerable to any means of assassination, even in plain sight, as seen in various parts of the world. However, not far from the river lay a wild forest, teeming with wild animals and venomous snakes, obstacles that Isaac knew how to handle. The forest lacked any accessible highways, making it an ideal refuge to evade or elude his enemy. It could potentially become their graveyard. Isaac estimated that he could reach the forest within 3 hours. After a moment of hesitation, He courageously waded across the river and resumed his relentless run. Soon enough, his pursuer also arrived at the riverbank but hesitated, observing Isaac from a distance. Meanwhile, Isaac watched from the other side, waiting for his pursuer to make his move. His intention was to lead his pursuer straight into the treacherous forest. He wished for all his pursuer and his partners would converge upon him, so that he could finally put an end to them once and for all.